see that David Perry, one of our board chairs, would like to say a couple of words. David, if you're on the line, you can go ahead and say.
I just wanted to thank Samaya on behalf of the entire board and every small business in San Francisco for her leadership. The focus of the chamber that was decided at last year's board retreat was small business. And never have we needed it more than this year. And I also want to thank Brian and Marlo for being here, because as a small business owner myself, the issue of PPP was a matter of business life or death last year. And it's difficult enough to ask a bank to look at all your financial records during the best of times. But when you're dealing with balancing payroll and whether or not you have clients or not, it's stressful to the max. So as we're getting ready, many of us have already applied for PPP Forgiveness. Some of us are in the middle of the process, as am I. I suggested that this would be a wonderful, wonderful tool and resource for our small businesses. So I just wanted, on behalf of the board of the Chamber of Commerce and all my fellow small business people in San Francisco, to thank the three of you. A very important trinity of information today. So Samaya, back to you.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate that. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Samaya Handy, and I am the Small Business Manager here at San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for attending today's Small Business Help Desk. The Small Business Help Desk will be an ongoing series each month, hosting different topics that we feel are vital to the growth, support, and success to the small business community. Today's topic is PPP loan forgiveness. We're happy to have Brian Kilkenny from Redwood Credit Union and Marlo Schindler from SBA to present today. I also want to give a special thank you to our Small Business Help Desk sponsor, Redwood Credit Union. Today, we will hear two presentations from Brian and Marlo. After the presentations, there'll be time for a live Q&A. If you have any questions at all during the program, please feel free to place them in the chat. Also note that this webinar will be recorded and uploaded to San Francisco's YouTube channel. For those of you joining us via Facebook and are interested in joining the Chamber, please go to our website, www.sfchamber.com. With that said, I would like to introduce our first speaker for today, Marlo Schindler from the SBA. Marlo serves as the lead lender relations specialist, as well as the public information officer at the San Francisco District Office of U.S. Small Business Administration. Thank you so much for joining us today, Marlo. And with that, you're more than welcome to start.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Marlo Schindler. I am the Assistant District Director for Lender Relations at the San Francisco District Office of the SBA. And let's see if you're seeing my slides, Samaya? Okay, looks good. So I'm just going to start with the fact that the PPP program has ended. I do bring this up because I think in general this word has gotten out, but at the San Francisco District Office, we are still occasionally, even as much as once a day, getting people asking about how they can apply for the program. So what we're talking about today is the forgiveness application process, not the application process to get a new Paycheck Protection Program. That ability did end back in May. So hopefully that's not news to anyone on the call, but you know, some things we take for granted when this is what we do all day, every day, and the information hasn't always gotten out to the rest of the world. So I'm going to start by giving the overview on the program, and then the process of forgiveness itself, and then Brian will get into some more of the details about how it's actually going in practice in the real world with his customers. So kind of to take that step back on what PPP is. So it was a loan designated to provide a direct incentives for small businesses to keep their workers on payroll. And I think sometimes people do kind of forget about that or think that this was just a small business loan, but it did have a very kind of specific mission that was given to us by Congress, and a lot of the reasons and way that forgiveness is structured is based on that focus that this program was intended to help keep employees on payroll. So the loan could be used to fund payroll costs, including benefits, and could also be used to pay for mortgage interest, rent, utilities, worker protection costs related to COVID-19, Uninsured property damage costs caused by looting or vandalism during 2020, that was added later, and certain supplier costs and expenses for operations. So while these PPP loans were meant to be forgiven, they are loans. So, you know, these are not grants. There are other programs that SBA has run for COVID relief for small businesses that are grants, but this one is a loan. So if it does not get forgiven, then the interest rate is 1%. It's across the board with all participating lenders. Um, Loans issued prior to June 5th of 2020 have a maturity of 2 years. Loans issued after June 5th, 2020 have a maturity of 5 years. And if you did get your loan after June 5th of 2020 and you have the 2-year term, but for whatever reason your loan isn't fully forgiven or is partially forgiven and does end up being termed out to a loan, and you would benefit from a 5-year term, that's not something that happens automatically, but that is certainly something that you can have a conversation with your lender about. And perhaps Brian can speak to that later, but that's kind of the easiest tool that the lenders have to at least reduce the size of payments, is to just help borrowers to get that extended term. So it's 2 or 5, not between 2 and 5. It's kind of one or the other. Loan payments will be deferred for borrowers who apply for loan forgiveness until SBA remits the borrower's loan forgiveness amount to the lender. And if a borrower does not apply for loan forgiveness, payments are deferred 10 months after the end of the covered period for the borrower's loan forgiveness. And the covered period, remember, was between 8 and 24 weeks. So not 8 or 24, it's between 8 and 24 weeks, depending on what how long it took you to use the funds, between 8 and 24 weeks. So there's been some confusion about first draw, second draw, PPP loans that were made in 2020, PPP loans that were made in 2021. So again, we're just kind of getting the time machine and going backwards. When the program was initially rolled out, there was no second draw. So if you got a loan in 2020, it was a first draw because that's all there was in 2020. It wasn't until late December of 2020 that we introduced the concept of a second draw, and then those became available in 2021. However, if you didn't get a first draw in 2020, you might also have gotten a first and a second draw in 2021. So since the topic today is forgiveness, the most important high level thing is some people believe we're only doing forgiveness for first draw. That's not the case. We're accepting applications for forgiveness for first and second draw. So you do have to have had a first draw to receive a second draw. So you can't have skipped a first draw and gone right to a second draw. There were some changes in eligibility between first draw and second draw. So for the most part, the terms were the same, the use of funds were the same. Most of the difference was with the eligibility. Let's see, there was the maximum loan amount and increased assistance was allowed for food service businesses. And so those are businesses that have a NAICS code beginning with 72. We had a lot of businesses and other industries asking us why they weren't included, since that, food and hospitality obviously were hard hit, but as were many other industries. This was a decision by Congress, so this was not a decision made at the agency level by SBA. So who qualified for a second draw? A borrower had to have received a first draw, and they have to have used the full amount before the second draw could be dispersed. They also had to have no more than 300 employees, and so that was down from the eligibility for a first draw. For a first draw, it was 500 employees. For the second draw, it was 300. And then one of the issues that we're coming up with as kind of a sticking point here now that we're dealing with forgiveness is that the business had to be able to demonstrate at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts between comparable quarters in 2019 and 2020. And this was information that some lenders did choose to gather from their borrowers on the front end, but they had the option of gathering it at the time of forgiveness rather than at the front end. So we're now seeing some businesses struggle with kind of that eligibility criteria a little bit, but we do have some ways as an agency that we've tried to mitigate some of those issues. So I'll get to those in a couple slides. So who is eligible for forgiveness? PPP loans qualify for forgiveness if they maintained employee and compensation levels. The loan proceeds were spent on payroll costs and other eligible expenses, and at least 60% of the proceeds were spent on payroll costs. And, you know, again, Brian and I had to be in the trenches on each one of the interim final rules, the procedural notices, the information notices that came out on this. But, as a small business owner, a member of the public, you might have missed some of the updates. So there were multiple acts of Congress that changed this program. So it started with the CARES Act, there's the Economic Aid Act, the PPP Flexibility Act, and there's been subsequent interim final rules that have changed the rules. So initially, the requirement was that 75% of the proceeds be spent on payroll costs. So this reduction down to 60% was meant to offer some flexibility for the business owners who are using their PPP funds. So how to apply for forgiveness? The first the kind of probably most important, and it's becoming less relevant as we get farther away from when the last loans are being made, is that the funds have actually all been used. So basically your covered period needs to be over. So again, that could be somewhere between 8 and 24 weeks. And we're now several months past when the last loans were dispersed. So most borrowers are eligible to apply for forgiveness based on that criteria. However, it's not, as soon as you're done using the funds, you must immediately apply for forgiveness. You have basically the entire life of the loan to apply for forgiveness. That said, if the borrower does not apply for forgiveness within 10 months after the last day of the covered period, then PPP loan payments are no longer deferred, and the borrowers will begin making loan payments to their PPP lender. So I think Brian's going to get into kind of some of the myths on the timing of when a borrower needs to apply, but I just want to reiterate that you have the full maturity date of the loan by which to apply. So 2 years or 5 years, depending on the term of your loan. And then kind of the how of applying. So it used to be just automatically you have to go talk to your participating lender. That is who you're doing the application process with for forgiveness. But now we have two processes. So there's kind of one if your lender has opted in for the direct forgiveness portal, and one if they have not. So the first step for you, if you're beginning the process of applying for forgiveness, is to determine if your lender is participating in direct forgiveness through SBA, because that will impact whether you're doing it through their proprietary portal or whether you're coming directly to SBA to apply for forgiveness. Then you kind of have to compile your documentation, and that's going to depend on which form you're using, which supporting documentation you're going to need to provide, and which you're just going to need to maintain for yourself. And then you submit the forgiveness form and documentation either directly to SBA or to your PPP lender. And then you wait. So the lender has 60 days to review what you've submitted before they're required to send it into SBA. And then SBA, we've given ourselves an additional 90 days to review the forgiveness applications. So theoretically, it can take up to 5 months to get a decision. We're seeing, quicker decisions. We're also seeing much longer decisions. So unfortunately, we do have some decisions that are taking almost close to 10, 11, 12 months. So it's a little bit of a crapshoot how long this kind of step 4 of being patient and waiting to hear back might take. So I mentioned the forms. There are a number of them. They are all available on sba.gov. If you go to sba.gov/PPP, everything we've talked about today is on there. There's a couple different options at sba.gov/PPP, kind of first draw, second draw, forgiveness, lender information, statistics. So if you go to the forgiveness section, you can find all of these forms. So just real quick top level overview. 3508 is the long form. So that is for people who have a more complicated situation. They did have to let some people go, or they did have to change compensation, and they need to do some calculations, or they have a larger dollar amount loan. 3508 EZ, there are a couple attestations that need to be made about again, what happened with kind of any changes to the number of employees. There's some safe harbors. And then 3508S is for loans of $150,000 or less. And so this is the vast majority of PPP borrowers are eligible to use 3508S. Again, this one was originally created for loans of 50,000 or less. And then through an act of Congress, we were able to extend the maximum loan amount up to 150,000 so that it would capture more of the borrower population. And I will also say that we've put up some relatively new resources. The FAQ is pretty old, but there is a new video. So if you discovered that you are eligible to use the direct forgiveness portal and you'd like kind of some instruction on how to do it, we have a borrower facing video that's available on sba.gov that goes through it. Or you can also go to SBA's YouTube channel and find that content there. And basically the direct forgiveness portal is just a digital version of the 3508S. So direct forgiveness, I've kind of mentioned it a couple times. How do you find out if your lender is participating? Most of the lenders that are participating are pretty actively marketing that fact to their borrower population. So hopefully you have heard directly from your lender, whether it's a bank, a credit union, or a fintech. If they're participating, they've gotten that information to you. But maybe you haven't heard from them and you don't know. So we have a list of the lenders participating in direct forgiveness available on sba.gov. Again, if you kind of just go to that forgiveness section at sba.gov/PPP, we're updating the list. I don't think it's maybe getting updated weekly anymore. When we had a big push, it was being updated more frequently. I think there's about 1,500 lenders on there. So check and if you're not sure, check and see if your lender is participating. And then if they are participating, you can go to our portal and apply there. And that is, so if your lender is participating, they still might have their own proprietary portal for applicants who are not able, who don't qualify to do direct forgiveness, who maybe are greater than 150,000 or have other extenuating circumstances. But if you are under 150 and your lender is participating, then you do want to go through our portal to make things easier. And as I said, it's just an electronic version of SBA form 3508S. So if you want to prepare ahead of time, like what information am I going to need before I even get portal access, you can always take a look at the 3508S, which is available publicly. And then if you look at the list and your lender is not participating in direct forgiveness, then you need to have that conversation on how to apply with your lender. A lot of lenders have set up their own proprietary portals. Some are accepting paper forms or DocuSign versions of the SBA forms. Some have established their own proprietary forms that include the same information. So, but it is, even if they have their own proprietary forms or their own proprietary portals, they're based on the SBA forms. So you can always take a look at our forms first before having the conversation with your lender. So direct forgiveness exceptions, as I mentioned, lenders who didn't opt in, borrowers who have borrowed more than 150, borrower does not agree with the data as provided by the SBA system of record, or cannot validate their identity on the platform. For example, if there's an unreported change of ownership. So, in an effort to make things easier, we pre-populate some of the things in the direct forgiveness portal from our backend systems, but they are not always 100% perfect. And you as a borrower can't change that pre-populated information in the portal. So if you're in that circumstance, you're gonna have to work with your lender. And then, for any other tech reasons that the platform isn't working for you, then you would go back and work directly with your lender. And each lender is a little bit different. So you'd have to speak to your lender to see what their workaround looks like. COVID revenue reduction score. This is a little inside baseball, but this is meant to help you as a business owner. So if you are a business owner who did get a second draw loan, and instead of having to show that with documentation that you met the 25% revenue reduction qualification to be eligible for a second draw, the program will score you, and it's just pass fail. So if you pass, then you do not need to provide any documentation. The score is satisfactory replacement for that documentation. And it is available to all lenders, even those who are not opting into direct forgiveness. I will say, however, that documentation does trump the COVID revenue reduction score. So that can be a good thing or a bad thing. If the COVID reduction score says that you failed, but you have documentation that proves that you did have 25% revenue reduction, obviously you want to provide that to your lender, and the lender can use that to move the application through. However, if the score says that you passed, but you already provided documentation to your lender that shows that you did not, in fact, meet that 25% threshold, the lender is compelled to go with the documentation, not with the score. So they can't just ignore documentation that you provide. So if you provide and I've had several borrowers, unfortunately, in this situation where they had already provided documentation before the score was available. And now the lender's asking for more supporting documentation because it's not showing what they're saying it's showing. So this is one of those places where it's actually cleaner if the lender's just allowed to use the score and not look at your documentation. The appeals process, this is something that I discussed with Redwood Credit Union when we were getting ready to do this presentation. I had hoped that there would actually be an announcement for this presentation, but it is still kind of in the coming soon, awaiting further guidance category. So, if you've applied for forgiveness and you've been denied or partially denied and you'd like to appeal, there is an interim final rule on how that process currently stands, but there are some changes that are probably coming out soon. So certainly the interim final rules on sba.gov, and you can check it out at any time, but I'd hope this would be a more updated and fruitful slide on the appeals process, but this is just kind of where we are right now. Then some stats on forgiveness. So this is just as of last week. We had, 11.5 million PPP loans through 2020 and 21. So that's kind of the whole PPP volume for nearly $800 billion. And we're making great progress in the forgiveness. It's kind of more than half have been forgiven in terms of number of loans, and way more than half in terms of the dollar amount. So, I mean, this is a process, while it could linger on for 5 years based on the ability of borrowers to apply anytime during the life of the loan. No one wants that. We all want this process resolved sooner rather than later. So there's no, advantage to delaying your forgiveness application at this process. I think for the most part, the policies I think have kind of codified, except for the appeals process. So there's nothing kind of big that Congress is talking about that's likely to come down later. So, you know, we'd like these numbers to be, you know, that 100% of the borrowers who applied have, or borrowers who received the loans have applied for forgiveness. So that's kind of the goal. That's what we're moving towards. And then just one last little plug, I kind of said at the beginning, PPP is no longer available. So like what is available, if you somehow manage to stay through this whole presentation without actually having a PPP, but you're just interested in what other COVID relief is available. So economic injury disaster loans are a totally different loan product. This is a loan. This is not a grant. It's a 30-year loan, 3.75% interest rate. This is not through a participating lender, not a bank, credit union, or fintech. You are applying directly through SBA. They recently extended the deferment period to 2 years for all COVID idle loans. They've also expanded the use of funds. So it's a lot more just a little more easygoing with the use of proceeds than like PPP. You know, 60% this, 40% this, all this documentation. COVID idles more kind of valid business expenses. So that's kind of a nice change from PPP. You know, this is just my personal email address, marlo.schindler@sba.gov. And I just keep plugging it, but SBA.gov has all of the most up-to-date information. We do have a lot of other websites that are kind of writing about our programs now, and some are better than others, and some are more up-to-date than others. I would just kind of counsel in general to, if you're looking for like the real letter of the law, that you look at websites that are .govs. So either SBA.gov or Treasury.gov have kind of the most up-to-date information. So those are your most trusted sources. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to throw it back to Samaya.
Thank you so much, Marlo, for that insightful presentation. Again, if anyone has questions, please place them in the chat and they will be answered after our next presentation. So our next speaker is Brian Kilkenny. Brian joined Red Credit Union in October of 2019 as its new business service administrator, assuming responsibility for growth, quality, and retention of Red Credit Union's business loan portfolio. Thank you so much, Brian, for joining us today.
Hey, thank you very much, Samaya. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here and appreciate the Chamber's invite. I'm happy for all of you, and I'm happy for myself that Marlo is here. She is a fantastic resource for all of us, both the small businesses as well as SBA lending participants. We are a huge believer at Redwood Credit Union in the SBA program. We have a long history of participating really at every level that we possibly can. We truly believe in the program for growth and opportunity for small businesses, and Marlo is a fantastic representative and resource for us, as well, again, as the small businesses. So I think taking her information down and kind of heeding her advice is a great opportunity. We do it, and she was. We've had a lot of long conversations and emails at 2, 3 in the morning during this program. So it was challenging for everyone involved, but again, we were all happy to be a participant in it because we knew how important it was for small business and for our community. So what I'm going to present today is some mythbusters, sorry, and some kind of best practices. Give you a little overview of what it looks like from. Marla did a great job on giving you an overview from the SBA and the really technical details and history of the program. We'll give you a little bit more color from a lender's perspective, give a little bit more of the multitude of conversations and scenarios we've seen with our individual members and borrowers, to give, hopefully fill in a little bit of the detail. Want to definitely let you all know and sort of start off with this is really intended for information purposes. This is not, we're not giving legal advice or accounting advice. So really do utilize the .gov websites that are available for technical advice. Utilize an attorney or an accountant, your attorney or accountant for again, matters that you believe, from their perspective, they can give you advice. Again, what we are doing is trying to interpret what we're hearing and seeing from the SBA. It is, again, most of this is fairly clear at this point. It was very murky and kind of choppy on the way to get here, because again, this program was launched from 0 to 100 miles an hour overnight almost. So there was a lot of changes when Marlo referenced the IFR and all of the changes. I mean, I don't know what the final number of changes was, but it was, I think, north of 60. And again, there was, I mean, we have, compliance officers that were really doing almost nothing but reading those and giving us updates of what that really truly meant for us as an issuing institution for this program. So we certainly feel everyone's pain with regards to trying to understand exactly where this was, because not only did it change, but it was new information coming out. So it was changes to existing criteria as well as new criteria. But I will say that the true intent of this program has always been to make it, the more expansive and more available and easier, even though it maybe, at times didn't necessarily seem that way. It really was. This was really, there was always defaulting to the small business and trying to expand the scope of who could get this, how they could use the funds. And I think one thing's important to say as well with this forgiveness process is, don't be scared of the process. Just, ask questions. You don't have to do this alone. We as an institution, our mission in this world really is to not just help our communities, but help, not just help our members, but help our community. So we're a resource that updates the information that we're getting from the SBA, from the market, things that we're seeing. So please utilize us. We'll have contact information at the end available, but please feel free to reach out to us, whether you're a member or not. We are happy to help. And really this program, the SBA is as well. I mean, they're doing a lot of things at a single time, so they might be a little bit more difficult to reach. But please feel free to utilize, an institution like us, whether it's us or not. Because again, we're all in this together, and we want to make sure that these things, every dollar gets forgiven that possibly can, questions get answered. We understand that, this is not what, fills your life. It does ours for the last year and a half, it seems like. But we understand that you're trying to operate a business, get it up and running, get it back to full capacity. So please, that's what this is for, is to let you, kind of give you peace of mind about the program, as well as give you resources to get through it. So, and then one thing I wanted to touch on was Marlo had mentioned that the loans issued at a certain point, up into a certain point, were a 2-year term, and then those after were a 5-year term. What we're offering is carte blanche to our members, those who have a loan. We will go up to, again, through a conversation and ensuring that there is a true need. But again, that is a conversation that you can have, and with, at least with Redwood Credit Union, that 2 or 5-year term would be available. And what we're hearing in the market is just about that. Cannot speak for the larger lenders. Some haven't entered the forgiveness process yet, so don't necessarily know. So I don't want to speak for anyone else. Just letting you know that is something that we are offering, so I can speak to it from that point at least. So I think we'll jump into the overview. Oh, sorry. Yeah, give you a little background on RCU. We were, as soon as we heard about the program, the conversation around the government was going to offer something and put out a program, we were in no matter what. I mean, we were ready to go, as unready as we were, and everybody else was with regards to the pandemic. We just knew that it was the right thing to do, and we trusted the SBA and knew that this was going to be an opportunity for small businesses, whether it be a small opportunity or large. We were going to be along for the ride and do everything that we possibly could. We pulled in probably close to 70 or 80 non-business service employees at the credit union to facilitate and process these loans. So we had people from all over our institution. And then we brought in temps after this was established a little bit. So this was an all hands on deck. This was the number one important thing for our entire institution. Again, we're a $7 billion institution. And this was the #1 priority because we realized that this could make the largest difference, along with a lot of other things that we were doing. We ended up doing about 4,000 PPP loans, which put us at, I think, the top from a credit union standpoint in the state of California. That was in 2020 and 2021. So we, again, did everything that we possibly could, and you couldn't do too much. So we're happy to be a part of it. It's been a wild ride, but we have a dedicated staff that has, I think, done a really fantastic job, and we've taken great pride in being involved. So these are some of the questions. We thought this was a good way to go through some of because there has been so much information that has changed, that is modified, as well as a lot of misinformation out there because this program is so large, and it was kind of trying to do everything for everybody, and we all know how that goes sometimes. And so again, like I said, there was most of the changes that had been made were absolutely in an effort to expand the opportunity for small businesses, not to really kind of carve out problems or anything like that. It was really to try to make that a larger and larger target so that more and more people take advantage of it. And I think they were successful in that. The first one is, and this one is, they're all, we hear various versions of all of these. But my loan is less than $50,000. It gets automatically forgiven, and I don't need to do anything. And again, Marlo has touched on a lot of this, but we hear this, and because there's a grain of truth in all myths, and this is definitely one. So that is obviously, as Marlo has said, that is false. You do have to apply for forgiveness. They have made the process very simple for under 150,000, and really, frankly, over as well. The process is not that daunting. And there are some kind of tips and tricks we can give you to help make that, but engage with your lender and your institution. And again, the process is fairly simple. We have it down to now for under $150,000, it's less than a 5-minute process. And that is, I don't know, PJ, I might have missed sorry, we have somebody running the slides for me, but we are not participating in the SBA Direct program for forgiveness. We have established, like Marlo had said, a process internally that we were very comfortable with, that once we saw what the SBA Direct was, we felt like it was very similar, but it allowed us to capture and recapture our members and be able to deal with them directly. So we felt like what we had established and what we had put together was equal, if not better, because we could retain the control of the communication with the members. So we are one that you would have to come directly to Redwood Credit Union. If you were a borrower of ours, you come directly to us. We have a very similar process, and it takes about 5 minutes. So we'll go to the next myth. I heard more funds are coming, and again, Marlo had mentioned this early in her presentation. More funds are coming to the PPP, and a third round will open later this year. That is false at this point. We have not heard anything, and again, Marlo would be the best resource to talk about any other funds related to this. But at this point, we have heard nothing, unless Marlo knows differently. But at this point, the program is closed for origination. I received my PPP loan from an online fintech, but plan to do my forgiveness through another financial institution since no one gets back to me. So unfortunately, if this is your situation, you do have to apply with your original institution, unless you go on and investigate and find out that they are participating in the SBA Direct. So you can, and Marlo might be able to kind of circle back to this. If let's say you can't get a response from the institution or fintech that provided your loan, potentially you can go on. I think you'd be able to search. I think there's probably an SBA opportunity on their website to identify whether that institution is. So I don't know if Marlo, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, so I mean, unfortunately, this is something we've seen quite a bit of, but it has gotten better with most of the big players, some of them opting into direct forgiveness. And it doesn't even have to be a fintech. Some of the larger banks also have been unresponsive to PPP borrowers who are trying to apply for forgiveness. If you want to reach out to me, again, marlo.schindler@sba.gov, or SFO, like San Francisco, SFO mail@sba.gov, with the information about your lender. we have a way to escalate it internally to our Office of Credit Risk Management. The lenders are, they have delegated authority to perform the forgiveness processes. And if they're not doing it, they are not in compliance with the program. So we're not a regulator, we're not a regulatory institution, but we do have kind of a department within SBA that does audit and regulate. So we can make sure that someone with a big stick can go after them and make sure that they respond to you, because they are obligated to respond to you. It's not, they can't just make the loans and then refuse to participate in the forgiveness process. That's not the nature of the program.
And then fourth is, I received a PPP loan earlier this year and heard I must submit my forgiveness before year end. Again, as Marlo had touched on, that is false. You have your use program, you have your use period, and then you have 10 months thereafter, as well as the life of the loan to submit. As Marlo had said, institutions, the SBA itself would love to get this program wrapped up. I think the fears and hesitation that we had seen last year because of so many changes and people didn't know how the tax implications were going to be affected, or if there was going to be more information. Really, this is settled science at this point. That we don't anticipate a lot of changes to use and any periods or any advantage, because there's a period of time where there was an advantage to sort of wait in this program because there just seemed like all of those changes were beneficial. At this point, it's settled science. So, the most accountants and hopefully all accountants and all tax preparers have a good understanding of what the tax ramifications of this program are, how they will affect your individual business. Those are questions directly for them. But again, there's no good reason that we see. Again, there could be individual circumstances to not get this process started sooner than later. And certainly, if you've used the dollars and used the funds, it's good time to contact your institution, at least have the questions, start the process, because again, everybody would like to get this wrapped up, and I think it's beneficial for the businesses as well. I mean, again, we wouldn't be asking it if we didn't feel that way. This is I've already used up all my funds, but my forgiveness application isn't due until 2022. I heard I can't apply for forgiveness still then. Again, similar question, answer's false. You can get started as soon as you've used those funds. And then again, the dependent on lender thing is accurate, like we've talked about, that you need to make sure that your lender has started that process and allowed the second round for forgiveness. I don't know what the actual percentage is of who has started, but I think most of the smaller ones ironically have, and I know that I had heard at least some of the larger institutions that had provided hadn't necessarily started, but I do anticipate that will happen sooner than later. This was a question actually in the Q&A that I had seen before I started was, I'm a sole proprietor with no employees and no payroll. I guess I'm not eligible for forgiveness since I have no payroll expense. That fortunately is false, and your PPP loan is considered owner's compensation, which is valid payroll expense. So that very much is the case, and that was a situation that was gray for a while, and is very much that there was large changes that were made to the program to effectively help this segment of the population, because there's so many businesses that fit into that category and needed the help, maybe more than anybody. So absolutely, that does count. I hear it's difficult to get forgiveness. Again, hopefully we've covered that well enough to know that this isn't something to be scared of. There's a lot of people that are out there to help, a lot of resources available, and really just look to get started, call your institution, or look out to another institution if you want guidance. Again, you can't use forgiveness, can't use another institution for forgiveness, but we're happy to help answer questions and get you going in the right direction, as well as Marlo and the SBA. And then these are just 3 quick tips, I believe it's 3, that to help get you started. And again, hopefully we've covered these in some detail. Sorry, they pop up on screen all the time. Here we go. Use 100% of your PPP forgiveness on payroll when possible. That makes it the easiest to account for and apply for forgiveness. It's a clean situation, and it's your largest expense. It needed to be 75 at the beginning of the program, then that was modified to 60. So if you can use all of it for that, and that you're set and ready to go. Payroll service. This is something that we found. Never have I seen in my career in a situation where it was if you had something, how much better off you were. Ironically, and unfortunately for those who didn't, a payroll service. So it's a good maybe starter conversation to have for about a payroll if that fits into your business, fits into your budget, fits into the way you account. Because they are not only what did it make it easier to figure out and identify how much you would qualify for because they prepared a report for you, but they now prepare a report to submit for your use proceeds. You literally call and say, "Can I get a report for my PPP loan?" They submit you everything that you need. It is an email with an attachment that they send, and you forward that directly to us. And if payroll expenses accounted for all of your PPP loan, that's it. So that was and they're willing to do it in arrears, which I think is very important to know. So this isn't like you got one bite at the apple and you were either a member of it or you either use a payroll service prior to PPP. You can go back and then provide them the information, and they will happily prepare that information for you if you become a customer of theirs. And they all have different criteria as to what that is. But if you have a complicated payroll situation, it is certainly worth the conversation. They're happy to do it. We have a lot of great ones here, both small local companies as well as the large national providers. So very helpful. Last one here is, and then consider discussing with your financial and or tax advisor before applying for forgiveness. Absolutely. Good to check in with them. Again, most of these will be, you'll understand it yourself and you'll be comfortable with it. It is good to know just what the tax ramifications are, how that's going to affect you, what that is going to look like. So I think just making sure they're aware, and then if you have greater, deeper questions, they can also facilitate that. But I think just making them aware and having a conversation of what you're going to do is beneficial for you and your business. And as I had stated before, we are happy to help all of our communities. We're happy to be part of the San Francisco community. Please utilize our resources. Here's our website, and I think we'll make this will be available. All this information will be available for a period of time after this. So please feel free to use we update our resources as necessary. So anytime there is updates, and not just to IFR, but just facts and frequent asked questions and tips. We have all of that, extensive resources. Again, not just for members. Please get on, use it, utilize it. Feel free to reach out to the business services department at RCU. Happy to help, again, members and non-members. And that's the presentation. So thank you very much again. Appreciate the opportunity. I know we both went a little long here, but hopefully this was beneficial information for you. And again, we're always available for questions.
Thank you, Brian. So we have a couple of moments to go over some questions. You already answered the sole proprietorship question, so we won't go over that one. But one of the questions I have here is, I have applied for my first PPP loan forgiveness, and it's in process with Bank of America. However, there's been an email that said that the maximum forgivable amount was $5,000 less than my full loan. But there seems to be some language that indicated that $5,000 could be forgiven. Is there something that they're misunderstanding, or is this something that's common?
So, yeah, this is something that we have seen with some lenders where they have basically decided that they miscalculated the original amount that the borrower was eligible for. So sometimes before they're even receiving documentation to show that the proceeds were used correctly, they're offering a lower dollar amount for forgiveness. So this is something that I know a lot of borrowers are trying to come directly to SBA to appeal these decisions. It has been, the first round of forgiveness has been delegated to the lenders. So you do have to have that conversation directly with the lender. I think this is one of those things that might be addressed in the new appeals process. So, and then some lenders are also saying, okay, we lent you 50,000. We think you were only eligible for 45,000. So we'll go to SBA and we'll get forgiveness for the 45,000, which you were eligible for, and then we'll make you whole on the remaining 5,000. So there's kind of like a variety of things that are going on right now with some of the larger lenders. So I think there was the question about whether or not this is usual or unusual. It is unusual in that this isn't what was supposed to happen, but it's not that unusual in that there are a couple lenders who basically have ended up kind of recalculating eligibility after loans were actually made and coming up with different numbers. So I'm sorry if you're in that situation. I do have a contact at Bank of America, so if you want to reach out to me, I know one of the other problems people sometimes have with the larger institutions is just getting a banker to respond. So I can at least get you know, an actual human individual to respond to you if that's part of the problem you're having with Bank of America and you're just getting the automated messages.
And I will give a little bit of more color too. What we're getting is they give you, it's almost like they give a cursory look at the loan. They look at they do the calculations. They'll come back and say, their look appears to be, you know, a partial forgiveness here. Essentially, the language is different than that. And they'll give you an amount that it looks like there was an overage, but they'll say this is still in review. And essentially, I would assume, if Marlo can speak to it, but it might go to, I think it goes to a second level of scrutiny, and they'll look at it and say, okay, yeah, it looks like there was a miscalculation, but it looks like it was done in good faith. Again, I'm just going on what I think they're doing, because we're seeing this is that it goes and there might be a variance of a couple percent, and they'll look at the use of proceeds, and then we are seeing both a balance due, meaning they're giving you partial forgiveness. So in your case, if this is settled, then it would be the $5,000. But we're also seeing that original email come across and say, well, it's still in review. And then we'll get it and say, there's actually 100% forgiveness. So if you haven't gotten, and that might be the language that you're referring to, that's saying there might be a chance, because it might still be in that, and they're just letting you know, your institution's letting you know that, hey, they've done the calculations. They're saying, you know, original reviews, looks like there's a small discrepancy, might be a loan, but they're still under review. And so you might have a chance of getting that 100% forgiveness. Again, can't speak to your case, but.
Yeah, it kind of depends where you are in the forgiveness application process, whether we're still in like that first 60 days and it's just internally being batted around by the bank, or if it's been sent to SBA already. And then after that, again, there will be a most likely, not 100% guaranteed, but I think there is a modified appeals process that is coming out soon. If you feel like the lender did not give you a chance to apply for full forgiveness.
Thank you, Brian and Marlo. And since I have one more minute, I'm just going to answer or ask two questions in one. What's the actual deadline? If the bank is still in review of the process, do that borrower need to make their first payment? And if the bank didn't notify a borrower about their second draw, do they need to contact the borrower? What is the process? It seems like a lot of people have questions regarding, oh, the bank hasn't notified me yet, or they're still reviewing. Do I need to proactively do something?
I'm happy to.
I would say there's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
you hit some of them and then I'll.
Yeah, no. So the deadline, when you're referring, and I'm assuming you're referring to the deadline that is the SBA determined that they're using. That is when your the use period plus 10 months. Your deadline is essentially, that's your due date. That is going to be your first payment, depending on how your promissory note was written. That'll either be your due date. That'll either be the first payment of your loan, and if you have not applied for forgiveness, or if you not received, forgiveness, you will owe a amortized version of the entire, or an amortized amount of the entire loan amount. You can still apply for forgiveness. You can still, but that payment is due either that day or 30 days from that point. Again, your promissory note will tell you, and usually everywhere I've seen, they've hooked it up to your online banking, so you can see it as a loan. So it'll show when your payment is due. Then I think another question that was in there was if they haven't contacted, if your institution hasn't contacted you. Again, if we're talking about second draw, there's a long period of time before your due date is happening. So they might just not be contacting you because they haven't started the forgiveness period, or maybe they've started it, but they're just not notifying people because they want a slower trickle in. But again, be proactive. Don't be nervous about contacting that institution. If they're not answering, again, there's resources with the SBA. If you truly can't get a hold of them, I think Marlo had said that there's a way for them to escalate internally. So please do that, because again, we all want this, even if the institution isn't actively trying to seek you out. It's because they're still trying to maybe establish their programs. But again, utilize the SBA for that specific question, and they'll be able to escalate internally. Because again, when you get a call from the SBA, you answer. So
the only requirement for applying for forgiveness for your second draw is that you've already applied for forgiveness for your first draw. So you can do it simultaneously, but you can't apply for the second draw forgiveness before you've applied for the first draw forgiveness. But so it sounds like in this case, they had already applied for first draw. So from the SBA's perspective, at least, there's nothing preventing you then from applying for the second draw. The forgiveness processes are, already active. So there's no kind of, except for having used the funds for your second draw, there's nothing that would be then preventing you from applying for the second draw forgiveness.
And just one quick thing on that. You can, if your first application is in review, you can. So it's really submission is what the SBA is looking at. So as soon as you submit for the first one, you can submit for the second one. You don't need to have a decision, because we've had quite a few that are in review that have been in review for an extensive period. I don't want to tell you how long, and they have already gotten their second draw forgiven. So again, it's the submission that the SBA cares about. The final decision is really a very much an elastic time period.
Thank you, Marlo and Brian. Do you guys mind putting your emails in the chat in case people may have follow-up questions? That would be amazing. Also, I do want to thank the both of you guys for the presentations and making time available. It's very much appreciated. And on behalf of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce, thank you. Again, thank you. I want to give a special thank you to our sponsor, Redwood Credit Union. I would also like to invite you to join us at our upcoming events. Tuesday, October 5th, Business After Hours. Thursday, October 7th, the Will Conference. Thursday, October 28th, the Annual Excellence in Business Awards. And then next year, March 29th through the 30th, we have the City Trip DC. And we also have May the 2nd through the 6th, San Francisco Small Business Week. With that, thank you everyone for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.